I now give the floor to Mr. Edmond Mulet.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to introduce the 7th report of the Leadership Panel of the OPCW-UN Joint Investigative Mechanism. I am joined by Ms. Judy Cheng-Hopkins and Mr. Stephen Mogul. Together, the three of us form this Leadership Panel. You will recall that the mandate of the mechanism, as established by the Security Council, is to identify, to the greatest extent feasible, individuals, entities, groups, or governments who were perpetrators, organizers, sponsors, or otherwise involved in the use of chemicals as weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic. The mechanism is not a judicial body. Rather, it is an investigative mechanism which reports to the Security Council. Despite the very real challenges of investigating complex cases in the midst of an ongoing armed conflict, the mechanism has taken great care to ensure that its methodology and findings are technically and scientifically sound. The report contains the findings in respect of 1. The use of sulfur mustard at Khosh on 15 and 16 September 2016, and 2. The use of sarin at Khan Sheikhoun on 4 April 2017. The findings of the Leadership Panel have been drawn on the basis of the sum of information and evidence obtained by the mechanism as set out in the report and its annexes. The Leadership Panel has identified ISIL as responsible for the use of sulfur mustard in Khosh, and the Syrian Arab Republic as responsible for the use of sarin at Khan Sheikhoun. Before I go into detail about these findings, I will spend a few minutes outlining the methodology of the mechanism. Mr. President, in collecting, analyzing, and assessing information, the mechanism was guided by the terms of reference as approved by the Security Council and the methods of work as outlined in its previous reports. It conducted its work in an independent, impartial, and professional manner. In making its findings on responsibility, the Leadership Panel was guided by the evidentiary standards as set forth in its first report. In the cases at hand, the Leadership Panel determined that it was sufficient evidence of a credible and reliable nature to make its findings regarding the parties involved in the use of chemical weapons in each incident. In accordance with its mandate, the mechanism took the findings of the OPCW Fact-Finding Mission, FFM, that a chemical weapon had been used as a starting point for each case and actively gathered additional information regarding each incident. It applied the same methodology with respect to both cases and pursued a rigorous and independent examination of the available information. In doing so, it examined possible scenarios as to how the incidents may have happened, including those put forward by member states. For the incident at Khan Sheikhoun, the mechanism examined 8 scenarios. For Khosh, it examined 4 scenarios. This methodology ensured that the mechanism covered all possibilities and conducted a thorough, impartial, and objective investigation. In conducting its investigations into the incidents at Khosh and Khan Sheikhoun, the mechanism collected information from a wide range of sources. In response to requests for information, 12 member states provided case-specific information, including the Syrian Arab Republic. The mechanism interviewed over 30 witnesses, in addition to those interviewed by the FFM, and collected and reviewed 2,247 photographs, 1,284 files of video footage, 120 audio files, and 639 documents, most of them requiring translation. I visited Damascus in August. Technical teams visited Damascus in September and the Al-Shairat Air Base in October. Technical teams also visited a neighboring country on 2 occasions to interview witnesses and collect materials. I wish to mention that the Syrian Arab Republic engaged constructively with the mechanism. The Syrian Arab Republic provided full cooperation and facilitated the mechanism's request for access to information and witnesses. The Syrian Arab Republic also provided the reports of their own technical investigations into the incidents, which were carefully reviewed by the mechanism. For its visit to the Al-Shairat Air Base, the mechanism had a number of objectives: to verify the authenticity of the logbooks and flight operations records from 4 April 2017, to review entry and exit records and interview responsible personnel, to photograph the types of munitions flown on 4 April 2017 in accordance with the records received, and to photograph the means for attaching such munitions into Sukhoi 22 aircraft. Collecting samples at the airbase was not an objective. The mechanism considered that if a single chemical munition had been flown from the airbase, there was little chance of finding any trace of sarin or its degradation products without specific information as to where to collect samples. The size of the Al-Shairat Air Base is approximately 10 square kilometers. That is over 900 football fields. The mechanism did not visit the sites of the incidents at Khosh and Han Sheikhoun. While a visit to these sites may have been of value, in particular to Han Sheikhoun, it was too dangerous to visit Han Sheikhoun, which is in a situation of armed conflict and under the control of Al-Nusra Front, a Security Council-listed terrorist organization. In response to a request for a security assessment in respect for a possible visit to Han Sheikhoun, the UN Department of Safety and Security highlighted challenges such as indirect artillery fire and recurrent airstrikes. Moreover, the Department of Safety and Security advised that any possible access arrangements negotiated with the armed groups controlling the area would not be without residual security risks. Notwithstanding the possible benefits of site visits, the leadership panel considered that the mechanism had gathered sufficient information to come to a solid conclusion in both cases. Witnesses were a very important source of information. Regarding Khosh, witnesses interviewed by the mechanism included victims of the attack, journalists present in the immediate period following the attack, doctors who treated victims, and commanders of non-state armed groups. Regarding the incident at Han Sheikhoun, witnesses included residents, personnel from Al-Shairat Air Base, government officials, doctors who treated victims, rescue personnel, and commanders of non-state armed groups. The mechanism also obtained independent expert analysis and assessments. It engaged several internationally recognized forensic and specialist defense institutes, as well as OPCW designated laboratories to provide forensic and expert support to the investigation. All of these bodies were selected on the basis of their independence, their established expertise, and record of outstanding performance. The forensic institutes and OPCW designated laboratories are accredited according to international standards. They were engaged by the mechanism to authenticate photographs and video footage, to verify the times and places where they were taken, and to provide independent expert assessments and simulations with respect to items depicted, as well as chemical synthesis and analysis. The mechanism also consulted with several internationally recognized experts in energetic materials and the medical effects of chemical warfare agents. Regarding Khosh, Expert analysis was provided in respect of the impact location, the munition, the trajectory of the munition, and its likely delivery method, as well as the medical effects on the victims. Regarding Haishekun, expert analysis was provided with respect to the nature of the plumes resulting from explosions and their effects, the characteristics of the crater and their likely cause, the remnants of the munitions, the dispersion of sarin, the amount of explosives used, and the medical effects. The mechanism commissioned an in-depth laboratory study with respect to the chemistry of sarin. The objective of this study was to test whether the sarin found in Haishekun could be linked to chemicals from the original stockpile of the Syrian Arab Republic. The mechanism therefore sent samples that were collected by the OPCW in 2014 from the stockpile of the Syrian Arab Republic to OPCW-designated laboratories. The study showed that the samples from Haishekun match with a particular chemical from the Syrian Arab Republic stockpile that is required to make sarin. The chemical is the precursor chemical for sarin and is called DF. As I mentioned earlier, the mechanism operates in a non-judicial setting. It does not have judicial powers and cannot compel the submission of information or documents to it, but instead relies on the voluntary cooperation of witnesses and those in possession of relevant information. The mechanism cross-checked witness statements and worked to ensure that the information it gathered is credible and reliable through means of verification and corroboration, as well as other measures of quality control. When assessing information, the mechanism systematically and thoroughly examined the source of the information and whether there were factors which may affect its reliability, such as whether information was based on first-hand experience of the events or hearsay, or whether there were concerns as to the chain of custody. When corroborating information considered important to its investigation, the mechanism paid particular attention to the possibility of circular reporting as to ensure that corroboration was based on independent sources of information. Questions have been asked as to the possible motives for the use of chemical weapons in each case. The leadership panel noted it was not helpful for the investigation to speculate and focused on technical issues instead. Mr. President, let me now turn to the findings of the leadership panel in the two cases. On 15-16 September 2016, 2 women were found to have been exposed to sulfur mustard at Khosh. A mortar shell containing sulfur mustard hit the house of one of the victims, who together with her neighbor was exposed when cleaning a black substance from the wall of her house. A second mortar shell containing sulfur mustard was recovered lodged in the pavement. The damage to the victim's house indicated that the trajectory of the mortar shell that caused such damage was coming from the southeast. The trajectory of the second mortar shell found in the pavement was determined to be from an eastward or southeastward direction of the impact location. The mechanism determined that ISIL was fighting against groups belonging to the Syrian Defense Forces, the SDF, from the outskirts of Khosh on 15 and 16 September 2016. It also determined that ISIL was positioned along 3 sides of Khosh, specifically to the east and southeast of the village, which was the assessed origin of the chemical mortar shells. Based on the positioning of ISIL and the forensic assessment that the mortar shell came from the direction of ISIL-held areas, the leadership panel is confident that ISIL is responsible for the use of the mortar shells containing sulfur mustard. Mr. President, regarding Haishekun, On the morning of 4 April 2017, an incident involving sarin killed around 100 people in Khan Sheikhoun and affected another 200 people who survived acute exposure. In the course of conducting its investigation to identify those responsible, the mechanism examined 8 possible scenarios, including that the incident may have been staged in an attempt to place responsibility on the government of the Syrian Arab Republic. The mechanism rigorously investigated possible indicators for all scenarios. In doing so, it gathered and closely examined information from a wide range of sources. While expert examination of the crater did not rule out the crater could have been caused by means other than an aerial bomb, the mechanism found nothing to prove that the incident had been staged. And when I mean nothing, I mean nothing. Certain irregularities and inconsistencies emerged in the course of the investigation, as are described in detail in the annex to the report. These were scrutinized. However, they were not of such a nature to change the assessment of the leadership panel. Mindful of the complexities of the case and the polarized political environment surrounding this investigation, the mechanism actively pursued unbiased sources of evidence of what happened in Khan Sheikhoun on 4 April 2017. These included video footage from 2 separate sources taken that morning, which show a series of explosions across Khan Sheikhoun, which was authenticated by forensic institutes as not having been manipulated, and which was verified to have been filmed between 6:42 and 6:52 hours in the morning of 4 April in Khan Sheikhoun. Satellite imagery of the crater and its surroundings before and after the incident. Video footage and photographs of the crater assessed by a forensic institute to have been recorded between 8:04 and 9:17 hours. And the chemical analysis of the sarin samples, which had been collected by the OPCW fact-finding mission from both the government of the Syrian Arab Republic and non-governmental organizations. The mechanism carefully put together pieces of a complex puzzle, of which some parts are still missing. For example, it could not establish with certainty that the aircraft which delivered the chemical bomb took off from the Al-Shairat air base, or the type of aircraft involved. Yet, the parts that have been established of that puzzle and put together are clear with respect to certain critical elements. Aircraft dropped munitions on Khan Sheikhoun between 6:30 and 700 hours that day. Witnesses saw and heard aircraft at that time, and 2 witnesses even recorded video footage showing a series of explosive plumes across Khan Sheikhoun at that very time that morning. Forensic analysis confirmed that aircraft and explosion sounds can be heard in the background of those videos. Aircraft of the Syrian Arab Republic were in the immediate vicinity of Khan Sheikhoun between 6:30 and 700 hours. This was established via information provided by the Syrian Arab Republic itself, as well as via information provided by several other sources. The crater from which the sarin emanated was created on 4 April 2017. This was established by satellite imagery. The crater was determined by expert analysis to have been most likely caused by the impact of an aerial bomb traveling at high velocity. This was the outcome of analysis by several independent, internationally recognized institutes with specialization in areas of forensics, defense, and security, as well as 2 individual experts on energetic materials. While they did not rule out completely that it could have been caused by other means, they said it was very unlikely in light of the nature of the damage around the crater. Experts examined whether an improvised explosive device, IED, could have caused the crater. They assessed that a crater of that size would require an equivalent of 10 kilos of TNT, but generally ruled out this possibility on account that such an explosion would cause much more damage than what was observed at the surroundings. Moreover, experts observed that a metal object protruding from the crater, which was assessed to be consistent with a thin-walled chemical aerial bomb, was too big and too deeply embedded for the IED scenario to be likely. The large number of persons affected by the release of sarin on 4 April 2017 and the fact that sarin reportedly continued to be present at the site of the crater 10 days after the incident indicate that a large amount of sarin was released. This was consistent with it being dispersed via a chemical aerial bomb. Mr. President, finally, distinguished members of this Council, finally, the in-depth laboratory study into the chemistry of sarin revealed that the sarin used in Khan Sheikhoun was very likely to have been made from the same precursor that came from the original stockpile of the Syrian Arab Republic. This precursor, known as DF, is a key component to make binary sarin, the kind used at Khan Sheikhoun. This conclusion is based on the presence of unique marker chemicals that were identified by OPCW laboratories in the samples from Khan Sheikhoun, as provided to the FF mission by both the government of the Syrian Arab Republic and non-governmental organizations. The same marker chemicals were found in the DF samples from the original stockpile of the Syrian Arab Republic and in sarin made with this same DF. Binary sarin with the same composition of marker chemicals would be very difficult to replicate, even if the exact composition is known. The in-depth laboratory study further revealed the production process used to make the DF, the in-depth laboratory study further revealed the production process used to make the DF precursor. This process requires a high degree of competence and sophistication and points towards a chemical plant production. The leadership panel is confident that when taken together, all these elements constitute clear evidence that the Syrian Arab Republic is responsible for the use of sarin at Khan Sheikhoun on 4 April 2017. Aircraft is in the air at a relevant time. The crater is caused. The crater was mostly likely caused by a high-velocity aerial bomb. A large number of persons are affected by sarin that morning. Sarin is found in and around the crater, and samples of the sarin taken from the crater are found to contain unique markers which match those of the precursor from the stockpile of the Syrian Arab Republic. With respect to the responsibility of the Syrian Arab Republic, the mechanism did not identify specific actors within the government and institutions of the Syrian Arab Republic. The nature and logistics of the operation would involve a range of actors from different areas. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, the international community achieved a major milestone when it prohibited chemical weapons in their entirety. When chemical weapons were used despite such prohibition, the mechanism was established by the Council to identify those responsible. The mechanism has carried out its mandate in respect of the incidents of Khosh and Khan Sheikhoun. It is now for the Security Council to consider the next steps. In doing so, I ask the Council to also consider the victims of those insidious acts. Attaining a world without chemical weapons is an imperative requiring concrete and unified action. The Security Council has a unique responsibility in this regard. including to deter all those who continue to believe that there is something to be gained from their use. I understand the political issues surrounding the situation in the Syrian Arab Republic. However, this is not a political issue, but an issue about the lives of innocent civilians. Impunity must not prevail. The international community must ensure that it has effective ways to respond rapidly to any future use of chemical weapons, including acts of chemical terrorism. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, the international community, including the Security Council, has forcefully condemned any use of chemical weapons by anyone under any circumstances. And yet, as I brief you today, we have received another determination by the OPCW of the use of sarin in Latamne in the Syrian Arab Republic. As I stated to this body in July, I have hope that together we can end the use of such weapons forever. Do not let the gains of the international community be lost. Let us move forward with humanity and renewed collective commitment to end the use of chemical weapons. Thank you, Mr. President.